All right, today we're talking about Grandma's biscuits.
All right. I'm hungry.
Parable of Leaven. Stick around. All right.
Biscuits.
For those of you on YouTube, if you have ever been given the announcements at church and you said the wrong name of someone who is having a baby, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Welcome back, everybody. We're talking about Grandma's biscuits today.
All right.
Parable of the Leaven. You excited?
I was hoping for biscuits.
Oh, well, I didn't bring any.
Well, then why did you bring it up for then?
Well, I mean, you didn't bring in mustard seeds last week.
I did.
Talked about mustard.
I forgot them.
You forgot them?
Yeah.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Diet Mountain Dew.
That's right.
No, so Grandma's biscuits, man.
I think we have to swap the bottles. Mine looks more like yours, and yours looks a lot more like mine.
Hey, have you ever had one of them old flat biscuits before?
Yes, they're like little pucks.
Yeah.
And the worst ones are the people that think they're really good at making them.
You ever had our biscuits before?
I know. You're like, yes. Can I get some peanut butter?
Yeah. Sister Lana Barnes, I hope she's listening. Like, Sister Barnes was, one of the first people. Of course, whenever I moved to KW, she's one of them people that her husband was bedridden at the time, and so you go see Miss Lana to try to encourage her, or to call her and try to encourage her, and there she is encouraging you. And anyway, she always gives me jelly, but anyways, one thing that she can do good is make him big old cat head biscuits. Mm-hmm. And for those of you that don't know what a cat head biscuit is, you probably don't live in the South. But a cat head biscuit is exactly what you think it is. That sucker is as big as a cat's head, and it's fluffy, it's good, and it's made from scratch.
And yummy goodness.
Yummy goodness. And we went to this place for Jason and Katie's wedding down in what's the name of that?
Loosedale.
Not Loosedale, below
Van Cleve.
Van Cleve. Well, they got this place that's got great food in it, but so I asked this lady, I said, what's y'all's breakfast like? Because we were eating there, and I mean, they flat laid out some good food. And she's like, well, I'll just tell you this, like, everything's made from scratch. And I was like, I'm in. That's where I'm at. Like, there's no other, of course, at Van Cleve, you can either get breakfast at the Subway, or you can get it over there where this lady makes these big old biscuits at from scratch.
So you didn't try the Subway, like just on a
I drove by there
on the way to the cat head biscuits?
Yeah. And I got one of them big old biscuits, buddy, and it was good. But it wasn't like Grandma's. It was just a little. It was different, but it was good.
Did y'all ever make them in big old hoe cakes?
Hoe cakes.
Yeah, it's like one. My mama still does it, and it's all. I gotta be careful how I say this, but it's almost like a lazy man's biscuit. Like my mama makes biscuits, and every one of them have 3 finger marks on them. I don't know why she thinks she's got to mash them down. Yeah, with 3 fingers, right? But if she doesn't, then she makes a big palm bread, right? So the palm bread is the biscuit, but it's the dough, but it's just one big biscuit.
Oh, okay.
So it's like the size of a dinner plate. So it's more like a hog head biscuit. But the challenge with that one is you have to cut it up.
Oh, yeah. So you make one big old biscuit, and then you cut it into sections.
Right, and so then you're back to the thing like when you're a kid where you have to, like, I think you're going to get a bigger piece than me.
Yeah, like, mm-hmm. Like when somebody's cutting cake, even today.
We had our first Sunday night thing the other, we're changing our, to our listeners, we're changing our Sunday night here at KW. We're just trying to help us to become closer to the people God wants us to be. And so we're changing some things about the way we do Sunday nights.
Yeah. We're nothing unscriptural. We're just
No.
Yeah.
This isn't like, let the women preach the first Sunday of the
right.
month. But I'm just saying, like, we're just doing some things differently.
That's right.
Well,
we're trying to move from academic to application.
right. And so our first Sunday, we're eating together, right?
Right.
Well, somebody comes over to me, and I can't remember who it was. I think it was Rick Bedwell. He's like, come here, I want you to see something. He said, I told Aiden, my oldest boy, he said, I need you to cut this cake for me. And so Aiden cut that cake, and he said, look how perfectly spaced those cake pieces are. He said, that's a machinist that cut that. I said, it is. You may think that, but you're putting the credit in the wrong place. He said, why is that? I said, because he's learned a hard lesson. And he said, what's that? I said, well, in our house, whenever you have something you got to share, you split it in half, and the other person gets to pick which side they want.
Right. So, we're going to make it think it's even.
I mean, it's just perfect. So it ain't because his daddy was a machinist.
Right.
It's because he's gotten so used to making sure that his brothers don't get a...
Not showing partiality.
Yeah, right, exactly.
He's going to be able to preach sermons on that one day. Like, my daddy showed me not to, show partiality. We'll cut that thing straight down the middle.
Exactly. And so
the other person gets to pick. That's awesome. That's a great quality.
Yeah, Aiden was with... I can't remember. I was telling John Nix about this one time, and he was with them, and they were at Movie Star. I wasn't with them, and they were at Movie Star, and him and Aiden Stafford, one of our deacon sons, was there eating together or something. They were all together. I don't remember what it was, but anyways,
that's always a Movie Star.
Right,
we're all together.
Exactly. And so John Nix was like, I saw him do it. I was like, you saw him do what? Like, I don't know what's coming next.
Yeah,
He's
I
like,
don't know.
I saw him do the cut up evenly thing because him and Aiden were sharing like fish or something like that.
That's what you think is going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. But he said, I watched him do it. So I was like, see, it's so instinctive in him that when Rick said, cut this cake, it came out perfectly.
Yeah, that's good. And I'll tell you what, that... I was so proud to see so many kids serving the church and so you might think, well, it was just a meal, but we had a devotional at the end, but you just
like by one of our elders.
Yeah, but one of our elders. But I learned things about people who had been coming for 4 weeks to church that I never knew about them in just passing at church. And so there's power in sitting down and having a meal together. And so I sat down with them, and it's like I learned about when they lived in Alaska for 5 years.
Right.
And it's like, and so they're telling me all these things. They're telling me about the church in Alaska and how strong the church is in Anchorage, Alaska. I hope you're listening from Anchorage, Alaska today.
Right.
But that's just that was a cool thing, and so there's a lot of power when you can sit down and eat a meal together. But Aiden was serving at the dessert table
in a Donovan. Yeah, I was like, why would you need to put one in a
so he used so much self-control. But Courtney and I were talking about it. She said he had one glove on so he could serve with. He's over eating with the other one. Just eating off his plate, Multitasking.
Right.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised what you can do when you got to do it, right?
That's right. So the parable of the leaven, Jesus he's been talking.
Oh, so that's what we're going to talk about?
That's what we're going to talk about.
Not biscuits?
Not biscuits. But that's the whole thing is for a good biscuit, it's got to have yeast.
If not, you got a cracker.
And nobody wants hardtack.
No, nobody wants
hardtack. I know that they lived off of hardtack back in the Civil War. I've seen them things in the museums, but
and you can still just about eat them.
And it sure don't look appealing.
No. But so you go back to these parables, and when we talk about them, I mean, really and truly, I mean, the reason why the Lord can use these things is because everybody understands a biscuit. There's not a point in time in history where people are like, I don't understand what he's talking about bread. I'm not getting this. So he uses these things that we can understand, and this is a real easy way for him to drive home a point with things in regards to what leaven is. I mean, you may not, in the blessing of it, so let's talk about what leaven is. So Tell me what leaven is.
Well, I mean, you talking about metaphorically what he's talking about?
I mean, like the actual yeast. What does it do?
Well, it makes your bread rise.
Right.
It's yeast. It's a leavening agent, so I can't go into all the scientific part of it, but certainly it...
I really wanted you to.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, you see...
It's a chemical reaction.
Clear eyes has an ingredient to moisturize.
It's a chemical reaction.
That's right. It's a chemical reaction
that causes the bread to rise, causes it to.
Go ahead, tell us.
Well, I ain't gonna spend a little time, but because I don't know, but I wanted to say chemical reaction just because that sounds real smart. and that's what it is.
It is, right.
And so but you think about this. Well, let's read the parable first.
Yeah.
Before we go there.
Matthew 13 is where we're at.
It's a whole bunch of reading today, okay?
Yep, stand by, folks.
Can you read all this?
We'll put a little note up here for whenever you can jump forward to the next time.
Right.
Yeah, we'll put that up.
Ready for your hash mark. Another parable he spoke to them. The kingdom of heaven is like in which a woman took and hid in 3 measures of meal till it was all leavened.
Boom.
That's it.
That's it.
So you think about this when he's describing something. Some things everybody gets, right? Even way down to the little bitty guys. You got what I'm saying? So like a city on a hill, all these things that, a light. Everybody gets the light thing, but it takes a little bit of maturity to really understand this leaven. And, this, you watch Millie run around here toting her baby, right? She just
That's my 2-year-old daughter he's talking about, yeah.
Yeah, she's just toting around her baby. She's mimicking mama, right? To a big degree, right? So she's just doing what mama's doing. She's really not, and it's just innate in them, right? To want to be caretakers, to want to be lovers, to want to hold babies, and that's why you don't see Millie running around with guns.
Yeah, my boys, it's amazing for me to have a daughter, because my boys are like, give me that baby so I can figure out how to pull the head off of it.
Right. They're on the couch and sitting on it, like you see her feet sticking out, but it's just because of the nature of the way things are. Well, the Lord is using this parable, and He says that. Another parable, the kingdom of heaven is like leaven, which a woman took and hid in 3 measures of meal till it was all leavened. So, what is the significance of that then?
Well, you think about it. It's there's so much that you can think about with these parables because Jesus taught and He's the master teacher. So I could think about so many things. But it's when I think about this, I was trying to look up a measuring thing. 3 measures also could be 2 pecks. I saw a footnote in that, and it's like, well, how much is 2 pecks? well, it's I think about like a chicken, like 1 peck, 2 pecks, and it's like that's it. Yeah, so it's super small, and to me that's the whole thing. Is like Jesus took 12 guys. Changed the world. You look at the gospel that it's so small to begin with. Peter preaches one small message about Jesus, but it was so big that 3,000 souls were baptized on the first day one of the church, the day of Pentecost. You fast forward, I don't know if it's a week later, or if it's 2 days later, or if it's a month later, but you get to the very next chapter. Peter and John are entering into the temple at the hour of prayer, and they heal this guy. And the healing of this one dude allows him to preach a sermon, and 5,000 believed. And so it's like one little thing can change everything. This preacher was said, I love, you talked about Rick Bedwell, I love his mama. And I know you do too, but we love Miss Jean. And so Miss Jean, I hope you're listening. But I'm going to use this in a sermon coming up. But this... It was asked about this guy who did this tent meeting back in back whenever they did tent meetings a whole lot. They asked him. They said, "Well, how was your tent meeting?" And he's like, "Well, it wasn't that good." He said, "We baptized a little girl. Well, that little girl raised 5 gospel preachers. And so, how good was that tent meeting? It exploded." And so what we see as being something that's so small, it can go into something that's so huge. And so to me, that's what the kingdom of heaven, that's what the church is something that's so small but makes such a big impact. Now, you go ahead and break it down for us what it really is.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head with it. And, but I think about the degrees of it, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's what I was saying. Is there's so many things that you could look at.
Well, it's not that
so many angles.
So you think about this like I don't know, like when you cook a steak, right?
Oh yeah, baby.
When I cook a steak, what do you put on your steaks?
I put generally just seasoning. I love Montreal steak seasoning.
We can't be friends anymore.
That's fine.
I'm sorry. I don't put anything on a steak but salt and pepper.
That's fine. To each their own, Chris.
Well,
I'm not offended by the way you cook your steak.
Well, I'm totally offended. You know what makes it worse is when you just cook.
Just admit that you're in a hole. That you're in a hole right now. That you drew a line that the Lord didn't draw.
Well, that's all right. I'll eat amongst the uncircumcised dogs. But you put your seasoning on a steak on the outside.
Right.
You don't like cut it open. At least if you do this for real, I'm done with the podcast. If you cut it open and put it on the middle,
no.
Okay, all right. I'm cutting my thing.
And I used to like it cooked well, but not anymore.
Oh, I wanted just about to say "ouch" when I cut into it. That's how red. That's how I want this thing to be. Well, but Jesus doesn't use that analogy. He doesn't say it's like a seasoning, right? It's something that becomes part of it, that is then completely intertwined in it. You can't get it out again. So it's not like you take the little bit of yeast and you sprinkle it on the top and you do your thing. You have to put that yeast down inside of it, and you have to knead the dough. It has to become part of its chemical makeup then.
Yes.
And so that's when the Lord uses this analogy of yeast or leaven. It's got to be something, the kingdom of heaven, the church. The church is like a leaven which a woman took and hid in 3 measures of meal till it was all leavened. So she puts it way down deep inside and lets it take its effect, lets it do what it's supposed to do, and it gets out through the whole thing. It's not like it grows a leaven shoot through the middle of it. It gets into the whole thing when it's doing what it's supposed to do. And that's what the church is going to do. You put the church anywhere, and by design, it's going to do exactly what it's supposed to do, but it's going to take time. It's going to take time to get people to understand. I mean, what I love about mission work is when you go into a community and you start a congregation and you get to see people that are used to kind of playing their hand close to their chest. All of a sudden, their focus changes when it becomes not about them anymore, but about what the Lord has done for them. And then you start to see that leaven starting to bubble up in their lives.
Yeah. For our watchers, for those who are just like listening on Anchor or Spotify or whatever, they didn't know that what I was doing. But for you who've been watching, you noticed my one-track mind, and we're trying to search in this. But I was trying to find the measurement of exactly like what a peck was, but it's just super small. It's confirmed, but that's exactly right. When it comes to seasoning something on the outside, you can have an effect on it. Mm-hmm. But I enjoy. My wife taught me how to make homemade biscuits, and I wanted to learn because I wanted to be able to give biscuits. I want to be able to make them for our breakfast. We did a Thanksgiving breakfast for our detectives back home, and so all the detectives would cook for Thanksgiving, and we would just do a breakfast. And so I said, I want to do homemade biscuits for the guys and the ladies. And so she taught me. And but one thing that I did not know about yeast was that you have to be careful about certain types of metals and things that you use it with, because it can change the reaction of it. And so my wife, she makes a lot of homemade breads, and I know yours does too, and we're evidence of that. but whether it's cinnamon rolls or whether it's homemade,
I sure wish we'd have picked a different topic when I didn't have any lunch today.
Homemade rolls. I ate a Mediterranean salad, so I'm doing great. But these homemade rolls or whatever it is, that like just a stroke of a fork, mm-hmm. mixing it up versus a wooden spoon or a plastic fork. Mm-hmm. That can be all the difference in the world of whether or not your dough's going to rise. And then, so there's all these effects that it can have on it. Humidity, temperature. You can't, the kitchen needs to be warm, for the dough to rise and stuff. Mm-hmm. But this is an effect that happens, like you said, it happens on the inside. Mm-hmm. And so we don't look at the dough in the refrigerator that's rising, or the dough that's sitting on the counter that's rising, and go, well, it's because of all those things on the outside can affect it, but because of what's going on the inside, because of what's going on the inside of Elk Ridge, Maryland. I better get that right.
Yeah, right.
But what's going on the inside is causing it to grow, and it's the same way with the church. That it's not really affected. It should not be affected by all these outside things. The church should, because of the world and what's going on in the world, it should not affect our decisions for Christ. Mm-hmm. It doesn't affect the fact that Christ is king, that He's sitting on the throne. Doesn't affect that He didn't rise from the grave. So what goes on inside the church? That inside the body of Christ, there should be awesome things that are going on. These little things that happen, these smiles, these hugs, this little Bible study, this word of encouragement, whatever it might be. But these little things can really help shape and form and grow the church.
So let me tell you how. So the other night, our two guys did our characteristic kickoff last night.
Yeah, Wesley and Tyler.
Yeah, 21 years old.
Two young military dudes.
Yeah, teaching our adult class. Great guys. And so on our Wednesday night, first Wednesday of the month, here at Kensington Woods, we have a characteristic we focus on, and we let our men go out. We split it in half, and this is an opportunity for two of our men in the congregation to be able to present for the month the things that we're going to study together as a church family. Well, Wesley and Tyler were over at the house
Tuesday night.
There you go. And
I just know I was with one of them Monday night. So.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, Tuesday night they were at the house. We're sitting in the shop, and Wesley Bird said, he said, I got to ask a question. I was like, all right, what's up? He said, so I'm in the military, and we're not supposed to, our philosophy in the military is not to see a problem without coming up with a solution. If not, you're just belly aching. Mm-hmm. And he said, so I've got.
I like that.
Yeah, right. I see something, a challenge that we have in the church. And I was like, okay, what is it? And he said, I love it here, and it's great. He said, I've never been more excited about being a part of the church than I am now because of, there's just so many awesome things happening. But he says, how do we get more people? How do we get more people to tell people about Jesus? And how do we do this culture change? And I'm just sitting there
And he had the solution?
No. Well, what I'm thinking is I'm sitting here thinking like, son, you're up to your eyeballs in it right now. And
this is what we're doing. You're fixing to teach an adult class.
Yeah, this is exactly how we do it. And and I didn't even tell him that, right? Mm-hmm. I just talked to him a while about, the attitudes and how we can approach some of our friends and how we can. I said, you take 250 people here, and then if everybody taught somebody the gospel over the next month, which is an achievable thing.
Yes.
We're out of space. Right?
Already. And big problems for the eldership.
And then in 2 months, if they do it again, we can't even fit in the church anymore. No. You just can't get 1,000 people. Even if we put TVs in every one of the classrooms and everything else, we're going to have to sit in a parking lot or something. And instead of us preaching every other Sunday, we'll just be preaching every Sunday. We'll just have to do 2 services. I mean, and what you're trying to get him to see is that listen, this is the way we do it, right, without telling him that, right? So that's what the Lord is talking about. You hide this thing way down deep inside, and when it begins to become intertwined with your genetics, then you realize that you cannot get it out. You'll never get the leaven out of any bread. There's no way. That's
right. And what people don't understand, and what probably people who are listening to our podcast don't understand, is this leaven, this burden to preach the gospel, to do the good, it's already in you.
That's right.
And there's zero excuses. You're looking at 2 guys right now who are preaching, who both left their secular jobs to preach the gospel full time, without any training other than reading our Bibles and listening to other people preach. I mean, essentially, that's about the gist of it. We listen to other people preach and read our Bibles.
Yeah, and that's why it's so funny because, Noah Jones and I were on this group at camp.
For some reason, they love us.
Yeah, I know it. We got them fooled, don't we?
I know it.
But Noah Jones and I were at camp, and we're listening to this guy. He had made this fuss about, somebody had preached one of his sermons or something like that. And I don't even know who this guy was, but somebody preached one of his sermons, and he happened to catch it. And he was all mad because they didn't cite him on it.
I hope somebody preaches my sermon.
I'm telling you what, I'm just sitting there thinking, like, if it weren't for the people that I have listened to and
Yes.
learned from, I wouldn't know anything.
Right.
Just studying my Bible, I've learned a lot of things, don't get me wrong. But every sermon I've ever preached is plagiarized in some way. If it's not, it's not from the Bible.
You either plagiarize Jesus or Peter or Paul
or James
or
Jude
or one of the people in the Brotherhood.
But other than that, it's garbage.
The Spirit of God owns it all. He's got the copyright.
Exactly. And that's why I felt like, I was like, blah, blah, blah. It's about me. I want people to think I'm smart. I want people to think I'm the good. Forget that. Just preach the gospel. And so, you think about this. In Romans 1 and verse 16, Paul says, I'm not ashamed of what?
The gospel.
Because it's what?
It's the power.
It's change.
Yeah.
So once you light that fuse in somebody, and it really lights and it explodes, you're never the same again.
It's going to go off. And that's what happened in the early church. You just look at this explosion that happens. We talked about those two first sermons, that went on. But like in Acts 5, in verse 14, it says, and believers were increasingly added to the Lord, multitudes of both men and women, so that they brought the sick out into the streets and laid them on the beds and couches at the least. The shadow of Peter passing by might fall on some of them. Peter has become, we look at Peter and go, well, he walked on the water, but yeah, he kind of dwindled away, or what, he began to sink. But it's like Jesus is going to make Peter and Paul something bigger than they ever were before. Acts 19 tells us that they took handkerchiefs and aprons from the body of Paul to people who were sick, and he healed them. That's power,
son. That's big time stuff.
But here's the thing. Then Paul prays to the Lord 3 times to take care of some kind of thorn in the flesh in him, and he's like, no, my grace is sufficient for you. The whole point was about the message for the Lord's word to spread. That if you're praying for a miracle today to happen in your life, I'm not going to say that God will not perform a miracle, but here's what I'm saying is that we ask for these things for ourselves, and we pray these selfish prayers for ourselves. You want a blessing in your life. The whole point is that blessing going to be used to spread the gospel?
Hey, so can you follow a logic train with me for a minute?
Sure. How long is it?
I don't know.
Yeah, go ahead.
You know how I get on these tangents.
Go ahead. But we'll even put the camera on you. Oh, there we go.
So Jesus as a leader did a perfect job of training his disciples.
Yes.
And the influence of the church never took root until his disciples moved their feet. And that was by design. Jesus could have come on the scene of the landscape, and he could have wrote it in the sky. Yeah. He could have done anything he wanted to do. But over and over, we've talked about how he chose the backs of men to saddle the gospel. In the church, the real disciples of Jesus, in Acts 1, there's 100 and some change people there. That's half of our congregation. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying?
That was pretty much our meal.
Yeah, our meal Sunday night. That's it. That's the only ones in the world. And then just a few days, there's 3,000. And then there's 5,000, and it's getting so bad that they're laying them in the streets. We got big fancy words. He's coming out in many multitudes. You know what you're saying? They coming out and like out of the woodwork. They coming on like fire ants now. Why? What changed it? It wasn't that the resurrection needed to happen again. It wasn't that Jesus needed to say something again. It wasn't that there needed to be some kind of huge event in the sense of like, the sun darkening, the graves opening, the veil of the temple torn in two.
Yeah, it was his people were infusing leaven into the lump.
His people were carrying leaven. And so you get to see the divine pattern really taking root here. Leaven. Because it's getting way down deep in the side in hearts of them. And all these things, all the blessedness of this really comes from us seeing that Jesus could have done anything he wanted to, but he chose us. Because he knew that the church, the kingdom of heaven, was going to be like leaven. It's going to be this. We got to knead it down into the hearts of men, so that when it becomes part of them, You can never take it away. You can never separate it from him again. That's that change that he's talking about.
That's right. And then that's the whole thing is like once you put it into the lump, you can never get it out. You can try all you want. You can cut away part of it. You can cut away some of it. You can cut it completely in half.
You just got different sized biscuits.
That's right. And it's all got leaven in it. And it's going to be infused. And so it can't, but the point is though, is once you put that leaven in there and it's put in right, it can't help but blossom. It's going to grow and it's just going to keep growing. And
so there's an other side of this then, right? We got to be real careful about the leaven that goes in.
Yeah. Jesus told him when he put them in, after the feeding of 5,000, he put his disciples and beware of the leaven of the Pharisees.
Yeah, Matthew 16. Beware of the leaven of the Pharisees. Why? I mean, they're doing the same thing.
It affects a whole lot.
I mean, the Lord is after these little. I mean, the Satan is after these little tiny nuggets that kind of leaven that he can slide in that just gently over time changes.
One little negative thing can affect so much.
Yeah, I was thinking about this. Can we look at
whatever you want?
Judges 8. So Judges 8, there's not a lot of the book of Judges. A lot of the judges don't get a lot of the story. You got what I'm saying? There's 15 judges in here, but a lot of the judges don't get big chunks of the judges, the book of Judges. Mm-hmm. But Gideon gets a pie piece.
Yeah, I'm scared right now because I've only got a couple of underlines in Judges 8. So. And Chris is about to teach me something on live audience. Go ahead.
No. I just think about, Gideon. He's one of the cool ones, right? He's one of the ones that we do Vacation Bible School of and all this and that and the other. And, we think about, I can't remember where it's at. I have to go back and think. But it's in 1 Samuel, and the people that are smarter than me will know. But, at 1 Samuel 5 or 6, something like that, where Israel wants a king. And so Israel comes to Samuel, like, give us a king that we can be like all the nations around us. Well, this isn't the first time this has happened. That, like when they come, we talk about that sometimes, like this is the time that they've gotten to the point that they're, because Samuel goes to God, like, look what they want now. They want a king. And God says, they haven't rejected you, but they rejected me. And so God goes through this scenario, let them have their king. Well, this isn't the first time this has happened. In Judges 8, after Gideon subdues the Midianites, does the whole, the OG 300, right? You remember that? Where...
Yeah, you got to go down and...
Yeah, the ones that lap like a dog and all this and that and the other. He's going to use 300 people to show that God can save with few.
Just his power. I mean, they just break these pictures and let these lights shine, and like God had them all...
Kill each other.
Yeah, and they were numbered like the grasshoppers.
And Gideon subdues them, and here we go. Israel's coming back home victorious, right? So now this is the chosen generation, right? I mean, this is the one that is the post captivity ones. They were the ones that crossed the Jordan, that stacked the rocks up. They're the ones that their family had to die in the wilderness. The ones that God fed a manna. The one that their clothes didn't wear out. I mean, this isn't like Israel that's complaining and belly aching because they got let out of. That we can't eat our onions anymore. You brought us out here to kill us. At least we had our onions to eat in Egypt, right? This is the group that has heard, saw, and been a part of all the blessings that God has done, and He's just watched them kill the Midianites, the people that were plaguing them, and because they had gotten away from what God wanted them to do, that leaven had come into their lives, and it had sent them through this cycle to where now it's time for God to raise up a judge, and He's going to raise it up with Gideon. And when Gideon comes back home victorious, verse number 22 of chapter 8 says, the men of Israel said to Gideon, rule over us, both you and your sons and your grandsons, for you have delivered us from the hand of Midian. Gideon did not deliver them from the hand of Midian.
No, in fact, when you look at the people that were there,
what people?
Like when he takes in chapter 7 verse 8, the people took provisions and their trumpets in their hands, and they sent away all the rest of Israel, every man to his tent, and retained those 300 men. Mm-hmm. Looking at versus the other camp, it's 450 to 1. And they're like, "Oh yeah, you did it, Gideon."
Right?
No. But they want him to rule over them.
He's but a hand of the Lord, right? Yeah. So they're missing the point, right?
That's right.
This leaven is still down deep inside in them. And God has raised up Gideon to be their deliverer. That's what the judges were for, right? They were supposed to be the guys that were temporary fixers, right? Like the handyman almost. You don't call the handyman, and when he gets there, like after he fixes your washer, you're just like, he's like, well, where do I stay at?
It's like, come on, we got a room for you, bud.
No. You come in, you do your job, and then you leave, right? So that's what Gideon
is for.
That's what Gideon was going to do. Was he was going to be the minute man.
I never thought about it like that. That's a good point.
So verse number 23, but Gideon said, I will not rule over you, nor shall my sons rule over you. The Lord shall rule over you. Gideon's drawing this line. Like, we can't let that happen.
The only verse they got underlined in Judges 8.
Well, there you go. Then Gideon said to them, I would like to make a request of you, and each of you would give me the earrings from his plunder, for they had golden earrings because they were Ishmaelites. So they answered. So apparently the Ishmaelites, they must have been the ones that like rocking the bling, right? They like the gold earrings.
Evidently.
It's just so many funny stories. Like maybe they were the Israelite hair band or something. I
didn't go to Old Testament history at some university, so I don't know.
Do they have one of those?
I don't know. I hope they do.
So they answered, we will gladly give them. They spread out a garment, and each man threw into it the earrings from his plunder. Now the weight of the gold that he requested was 1,700 shekels of gold. Don't be doing the search thing again.
Okay.
Leave me with the minutes of silence.
All right.
So they throw in all this stuff, right?
Right.
Verse number 27. Now let's, before we read verse 27, we're talking about leaven, right? Mm-hmm. Now they've come to Gideon. Gideon has known what he's doing. I mean, you think about what Gideon is even scared at the beginning. The fleece.
That's
and the
what
dude.
I was gonna say. Yeah.
So like he's like, okay, God, give me, if this is for real,
right,
then I'm gonna put this blanket out here.
And it's like I'm gonna do another test,
but I want it backwards this time, just for validity. So it's like I'm going to multiply.
No dew on the ground, all the dew on the fleece.
Exactly.
No dew on the fleece.
Checking your math. That's what I call it. You multiply, then you can divide, and if you get the same answer on both sides, then you know that it's true.
He was living by fact and not by faith at that moment.
Living by fact and not by faith, and so God steps in because it's not about the man, it's about God. Mm-hmm. He can take anybody and do what he wants to do. Well, Gideon, he rises up, kills takes the 300, does his job, boom, they're doing their job, right? Now they come to Gideon, and Gideon realizes what God has done. But what's happened is you see a little bit of leaven's been sown in Gideon's heart. Because all of a sudden, I'm not going to be a king. I can't be a king.
Right.
That's not what God wants me to do. My sons can't be kings. My grandsons, maybe he had enough, foresight to realize what the challenge that would be to Israel, right? Maybe it's from his experience. Maybe it was because he knew that God could save with few. Maybe it was because he knew that God didn't want him to have there's a lot of things we could say maybe. But he says no. But what he doesn't do is keep the leaven out of his life.
Yeah.
He keeps it out of their life, but he doesn't keep it out of his. So we got to be real careful because it's real easy for us to be able to see what's wrong with everybody else, but it's sometimes real hard to be able to see what's wrong with me. And so when they bring this to him, then Gideon made it into an ephod. That's the priest garment, right? That was the what they wore in their.
Yeah, they wore it before. They had to wear it. It bore the names of the children of Israel and 12 different kinds of stone, one for each tribe.
But he wasn't supposed to do that. Right? They already had one made. Mm-hmm. They make one back in in Moses' day. They already made one with 12 stones on it, representative of each one of the tribes, and just like you said. So Gideon says, I'm not going to be a king. I don't want my sons to be a king, but you can see this idea, like with Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. There's just something that they had developed really special about what God had chosen. They had put a lot of emphasis on the priests are these really important people. And these guys that serve the temple are these really important people. Well, those guys were just the handymans too. They were just the dudes that were. They were just, that's why the Hebrew writer says they're of like vile path. They're just like we are, normal guys. Well,
but mankind had placed a big thing on that. The Levitican priesthood.
That's right.
It's just like when Jesus gave the. I'm not trying to run down a long rabbit trail here. It'll be a short one, but like when you
Good
do
animals.
when you do he gives the story of the Good Samaritan, like, oh, so you had a priest that went by on one side of the road. Oh, and then a Levite went by on the. Well, those two guys were the same
Right.
tribe. They were the priests.
That's right.
Surely these guys will stop. But they had an expectation of them. So yeah. So now Gideon says, "Make an ephod for me."
Yeah,
pretty much.
You know, I won't be your king, but I'll kind of be like him.
Yeah.
I'll kind of be this really important dude, anyways, because I like being the really important dude. So let's just make an ephod. Then he made an ephod and set it up in. Is that Oprah? How you say that?
You may try to say it in
say it in Hebrew.
In Hebrew. All right. Ophora.
There's not even another O in it. You just added one. Let's just quit. And
that's Hebrew, man. Don't you know?
Okay, it's fine.
All right, so Oprah's in there.
All right, so the Oprah. So they made the ephod and they set it up in Oprah. Yeah. And I'll never look at this without saying Oprah from now on.
Right.
I'm going to say it in the sermon one day on accident now because of you.
How do you say it?
I don't Oprah. You know,
what's the difference between that and Oprah?
Well, $1 billion.
Right. What you got is you got two rednecks that are trying to read this thing.
But the problem is what happens. It don't matter if they set it up in Oprah
Israel played the harlot. We understand what that is.
Yeah, or Maury Povich, right?
Yeah.
And the problem was what happened, and all Israel played the harlot with it there.
They turned away from God, and so you got one leader. And what's crazy too is like Gideon, like this is a perfect story of Leaven because Gideon, whenever God calls him, he's threshing wheat, hiding from the Midianites, thinking that they're going to kill him. And because if he's seen out threshing wheat, then he can die.
That's right.
And so
he's doing it on the sly.
That's right. He's threshing wheat in the wine press.
Right.
You don't do that.
Right.
You thresh it out in the open so that the wind
Chaff
can
can
take
blow
the
away.
chaff away.
Right.
And so the Lord comes to him in chapter 6 and says, the Lord appears to him and says, "The Lord is with you, you mighty man of valor." And so it's like, mighty man of valor, he's scared to death sitting in the wine press. And so this God, though, he puts this little leaven in, and he takes care of all these things for him. But what Satan will do is he'll put that little bit of yeast in, that little bit of leaven.
He'll get us to trade 10 for gold.
That's right.
That's what he does for Gideon right here, is trading his gold for 10 backwards now. Because, you know, what you see is Gideon says, no. It's wrong for us to have a king. It's wrong for us to have a guy that's over us. You know, this guy that has this multi-generational ruler, you know, status or whatever. So what he does is he just changes the name of it. I mean, he just essentially changes the title to it. Is all he does. You know what's funny, because like when you go somewhere, like we go to the school over there, what do they always introduce us as?
Oh man, yeah, Pastor Bob, Pastor Chris.
Yeah, I mean, we just love these titles, right? You know, like why can't we just be Chris and Bob?
That's right.
You know, and so here's what it has with Gideon. He's like, well, the king. Now that's the wrong thing, right? Like I can't be a king, but what I'll do is I'll set myself up, and I'll pattern myself after God's pattern of the way that He set it up. So all I'm doing is I'm still putting 11 in, but I'm just calling it something else. And like so, somebody says, don't put that leaven in there, and you say, oh, I'm not putting leaven. I'm not putting leaven in, I'm putting yeast in. Well, it's the same thing. You're still doing the same thing. You're going to get the same result in the end, because what he's after is the reason why God didn't want a king is not about obeying his rules. It's about getting them away from their eyes to who really rules over their minds and their hearts. And so when Gideon made the ephod, he just changed out the king for a new line of priests. And so he just took their minds and their hearts off of God and put him on him. And so at Oprah, they played the harlot.
They played the harlot. And like, there's nothing else good spoken about Gideon. Like so the Midianites were subdued before the children of Israel, so they lifted their heads no more, and the country was quiet for 40 years in the days of Gideon. But the problem is like everything that God, they literally take pictures and break them, and all these Midianites, 450 to 1, they killed themselves, and Israel didn't have to lift a single hand to it. But now, right after a victory, this is typical of God's people. It's typical of us today, that right after God brings a victory for us, we turn right back and we turn our back on him.
Yeah.
And it only takes one little bit of leaven, one little thing of Satan, and most of the time, like Satan, he deceives us, and it's like
He's real fine with your victories.
Right.
He's I mean, like, really and truly, he's fine with your victory. So you think about Leaven, then let's go back to our parable. If he's real fine with your victories, he's okay with those just as long as he wins the war. It doesn't matter, because if you're just perfectly happy being on the mountain today, he's okay as long as you keep walking, because there's a point of that mountain where the valley is going to come back into play again, and he's going to be right there waiting on you in the valley. And so Satan, what we got to realize is that when we put this thing in our hearts, when we put this leaven, this seed of the kingdom, this yeast, it's always then about rising.
Always.
It's never about going back down again. So, hey, we appreciate you guys' time. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
This is the Unscripted Podcast.